From part 7 of JoJo's on, the story takes place in an alternate universe. Not the one that's created at the end of part 6 after Pucci resets everything, a completely separate, unrelated universe. And even though this universe is all new, there are still plenty of familiar faces and names, most notably the Joestar family. In part 8, we find out that this universe's Joestar family shares a lineage with the Higashikatas through the marriage of this world's versions of Jonathan and Rina, rather than the two families being entangled because of the affair Joseph has with Tomoko.
Joseph! You finally came back for me after all of these years!
This is the first and last line of every single member of both families. Starting with George Joestar, the father of Johnny, whose first line is said during the 3rd chapter when Johnny's reflecting on what his life was like as a horse rider before he was shot in the spine and paralyzed from the waist down. At just 5 years old, Johnny is shown to be a horse riding prodigy, and when George discovers this, he says, "My son's a horse riding genius." George's relationship with and opinion of Johnny is something that evolves during the course of Steel Ball Run. Here, he's proud of his son, but he grows to deeply resent him and has no problem showing it. By the end of the story, George shows genuine regret for the time he spends letting the emotional wounds he inflicted on his son through abuse and neglect fester rather than trying to make amends. His last words are, everyone please just for a bit, please listen to what I have to say. I've come here because I've treated my own child horribly for years and years. And the whole time up until now, I never realized that cruelty. I know that apologizing isn't enough to make up for scarring my child's heart, but that is something that I've finally come to realize. My child's name is Johnny Joestar. He crossed from the far-off West Coast all the way across the continent all by himself. And now, he's finally made it to New York. This is obviously George's best line, but just to give a little bit of context for this, I think his most impactful line, at least as it applies to Johnny, is, "Oh God, you took the wrong son. Get out. You're not welcome here anymore. Get out." Because Johnny refuses to drown the mouse he befriends as a kid, the mouse scares the horse that Johnny's older brother Nicholas is riding, which leads to his death. George's relationship with Johnny is strained even before this happens, but the rift between him grows because George blames Johnny. Things boil over when they get into a fight over Nicholas's old riding boots. Johnny wants to wear them, saying they're just old boots, but George doesn't think Johnny is worthy. They get into a fight, ending when Johnny knocks George into a cabinet, causing him to get stabbed by a bunch of glass. This is their last interaction for years, until George makes his very public apology to his son. Next up would be George's wife, Anne, but she doesn't say anything. She is alive though, at least, unlike her main universe counterpart. The first time we see Nicholas Joestar is in another flashback, where we see what Johnny's upbringing was like. George is a strict father, who at one point chastises Johnny for keeping a pet mouse named Danny. After breaking their agreement on how he would care for it, George tells Johnny to drown him. Nicholas immediately gets on big brother duty and asks, "What are you gonna do, Johnny? Are you gonna drown it? We can't keep that mouse in our place anymore, Johnny. Listen, I have an idea. How about we let Danny go into the woods? You can do that, right? I'm sure Danny will be fine on his own in the woods." Right after this, Nicholas comforts his younger brother by saying, "Listen, Johnny, you're still young. No matter what Dad says, when you get older, I'll teach you how to ride. I promise. Then we can ride around the world together, helping each other through hard times." Next up, we have Johnny. His first line happens in the same flashback as Nicholas's, but a bit earlier when he's talking to his dad about his pet mouse. I'm sorry, Father. He was so cute and I couldn't. But you said I could keep him. You promised." Not too long after the ending of Steel Ball Run, Johnny marries the daughter of his fellow racer, Norisuke I Higashikata. They end up having a son, and later on, Rina contracts a mysterious illness that causes her skin to appear folded like origami. Johnny steals the saint's corpse to remove this disease from her and give it to literally anyone else, but out of all the people in the world that it could possibly pass on to, the disease gets passed on to his son. Knowing that his only other option is to offer up himself, Johnny uses his stand to take on the burden instead, and he dies shortly after. "I won't use the saint's corpse anymore. It will bring misfortune to someone somewhere. George Joestar, I'm so glad I was able to meet you. That is enough for me. I couldn't exchange that for anything. I found a happiness that cannot be replaced. It will be exchanged for something of equivalent value. but I have something here I couldn't exchange for anything. And Johnny's best line is back in Steel Ball Run. After defeating Dio, losing the race, and storing the corpse, Johnny takes Gyro's body back to his home country to give him a proper burial. While reflecting on everything that they faced on their journey, Johnny breathes deeply, lets out a sigh of relief, and says, "Why don't we pray that we have a safe voyage crossing the Atlantic Ocean and getting you back home? Home. Let's go home." Much to the disappointment of the shipper community and maybe even Araki himself, considering some of the official illustrations he's made of Johnny and Gyro, Johnny has a wife, Rina. She only speaks during the JoJolian flashback where Johnny dies. When she wakes up after being cured of her illness, she asks, "Where's George? Did you bring him with you? What we wished for? Your darling son?" She mourns the loss of her husband at the end of the flashback, but this is also her last line. Johnny and Rina have 2 children, George, who we just discussed, and an unnamed, unshown daughter. Even though we see George III in this same flashback, he never says anything. George eventually marries his wife Elizabeth, and they have 4 children, 2 daughters and 2 sons, with one being named Joseph, aka Josefumi, or just Fumi. When we first meet Joseph, he's waiting at the train station in S City for his girlfriend. He notices that a thief is stealing Lucy Steele's bags, and he stops the man by kicking a sandal at him. He gives Lucy her luggage back, saying, "Are you alright, madam? Here, your bags? It's no problem. Well, take care." Realizing that his own wallet had been stolen by the thief as well, Joseph agrees to take a job from Lucy and show her around S City so he can make money to take his girlfriend out to an amusement park. During the tour, they're attacked by a killer guardrail and barely make it out with their lives. Thanks to Joseph, Lucy survives, but the mysterious lung disease that she has starts to flare up, causing her to have a coughing fit that concerns Joseph. "Lucy, please don't talk anymore. I'll run us into town. Don't talk anymore." Joseph ends up taking Lucy back to America himself, but he gets stuck there because of travel restrictions during World War II. He ends up working at the Speedwagon Foundation for Lucy, and then later a hotel casino in Atlantic City where he meets Susie Q. They get married and have 2 daughters, Holly and Barbara Ann. Before she's reduced to being the lab rat of Dr. Wu and Toru, Holly Joestar is a very successful ophthalmologist. She happens to be on duty as a young Josefumi is brought into the hospital after drowning at the beach while his mother was distracted. She races to save his life. I wouldn't say he's drowned. His occipital bone was crushed. It seems he struck a rock on the beach while he was being pushed around by the waves. That seems like a far more likely cause of death. It'll probably kill him sooner than drowning would. Her saving Josefumi leads to him becoming undyingly loyal to Holly, to the point where he's willing to die to save her life. She practically inherits another son, who works together with her own son Yoshikage to save her, and even though the 2 of them die in the process, their will is carried on through Josuke. With some help, he manages to uncover the rock human conspiracy in Oreo, and almost dies himself trying to stop Toru and cure the woman he sees as his mom. And interestingly enough, even though Josuke is a person completely separate from Yoshikage, Holly still sees her son, who she loves deeply, in him. She would rather him be safe than risk his own life to save her. The head doctor's true form cannot be grasped. Yoshikage, you absolutely must not chase after him. But it's okay for him to do the chasing. Please, be careful, because I really want to see you again. I think this is one of the more powerful moments in the manga, because throughout JoJolion, we're shown a few times how badly being constantly experimented on affects Holly's memory and personality. She goes from being a brilliant doctor to a woman who mostly communicates through incoherent babbling. Even after having her memories and personality basically stripped from her due to her brain being frequently overtaken by stone, one of the few parts of reality that she can firmly grasp onto is the fact that Yoshikage is her son. And even though Josuke isn't entirely him, Holly knows that he's in there in at least some capacity. What I think her best line is highlights the love that she has for her children. I know, I'm well aware of that. Whatever happens, no matter what kind of cruel things happen in this world, I can never forget what's most important. I can never forget my own children. Not ever. She says this during the scene when she's reunited with Josefumi years after saving his life, just when her illness is starting to negatively affect her memory. She mistakes Fumi for one of her own children, and coincidentally, he sees her as this motherly figure in his life because of the compassion she showed him as a child. Holly ends up having 2 children with her husband, a son named Yoshikage and a daughter named Kei. After Holly asks for his help to save Fumi, Yoshikage responds, "Huh? Me? Mom, after your night shift is over, we're supposed to go see Titanic, aren't we? That movie's 3 hours long. Shouldn't we get going? That kid's dead, ain't he?" And years later, the two of them work together to save Holly by stealing a Rokakuka fruit from Tamaki Damo and his rock human fruit trafficking mafia. It doesn't go well either. They get cooked, and Yoshikage sacrifices himself so that Fumi can get away. Sorry, Josefumi. I roped you into this mess. None of this is your fault. You haven't done anything wrong. Okay? Killer Queen. Turns out he has just as much sauce as the original universe's Kira, and I would go for this being Yoshikage's best line as well. Our very first introduction to Kei happens in the same flashback that Yoshikage and Holly save Fumi, but she's just a little baby toddler here and doesn't say anything. The first time she speaks is when the Higashikata family is welcoming Josuke into their home. She tends to him saying, "I will hold on to your hat." Kei is severely underused in JoJolion. She doesn't get to do much throughout the manga before her unfortunate death at the hands of Wonder of You. However, she does come in clutch when she needs to deliver the cell phone that Josuke uses to kill Toru at the hospital with. "Josuke, I came here to give you this. It's from Yasuo." And she just immediately dies after. I'm not entirely sure that Kei has a best line, but one of my favorite moments is when she's describing to Josuke how the equivalent exchange between Yoshikage and someone else created him. He begs Kei to tell him just exactly who he is, and she says, "That's right, you are you. I know that. It's the same for everyone in this world. You are your own self." Josuke thinks he's Yoshikage, he thinks he's Fumi. He spends so much time chasing a past that he can never remember because it isn't his. And speaking of Josuke, his very first line happens in the beginning of the story when Yasuo finds him shortly after he's been born. "You are Yasuo Hirose? Is that what you said? Your name? Then who am I? What am I doing here?" I love how Josuke's journey isn't so much about finding out who he was, but rather who he is now. He isn't Kira or Fumi, he's himself. By the end of JoJolion, after the family experiences tragedy and loss, they struggle to emotionally move forward. After losing Jobin, they accept Josuke as a new brother of theirs. "Me? You want me to pick the cake?" Such a simple line, but the fact that the remaining Higashikata siblings defer a decision on something as small as picking out a cake shows how much they've come to trust him and accept him into their family. I think Josuke's best line happens in the same scene as Holly's last. He responds to her saving him by saying, "My name is Josuke Higashikata, and my memories from when I was born are long gone from this world, and they'll never come back. But even so, there's something I'm certain of. I'm your son. No matter where I go or what era I live in, that's something certain I can believe in. Mom, I'll save you, I swear it." While her sister is suffering from a mysterious sickness and her niece and nephew are being killed by the mob and a crazy doctor, Barbara Ann is living in Hawaii with her own two crazy-ass kids, Jodio and Dragona. Jodio happens to be neurodivergent, but before Barbara Ann is told this, she stresses while trying to figure out why he's doing so poorly in school. "Jodio, you know you're supposed to be studying." Honestly, he really is a smart boy. It's so odd his grades are at the bottom of his class. By the way, it sure was lucky for us that Dragona took yesterday off. I heard there was a fire on the school bus. They said it might have been arson. Apparently, a teacher and about 20 students were hospitalized with major burns. Schools are so awful these days. Yeah. Jodio is the one who sets the bus on fire because some of the students were bullying Dragona. Barbara Ann and her husband already had a strained marriage, but Jodio setting this bus on fire inadvertently leads to his father losing his job at the insurance company he worked at, which directly leads to their divorce and him going to the store to get milk and never being heard from again. Jodio is fiercely defensive of Dragona, to the point where he almost kills 2 police officers for putting their hands on them. Again, the reason why Jodio sets this bus on fire is to fight back against the bullies. Dragona's first line is said when they're playing water polo with other students during gym, and they turn out to be ass. Dragona accidentally hits a girl in the face and says, "Sorry," right before the bullies spike the ball back in their face out of revenge, even though it was an accident. Dragona is the only person who knows Jodio caused the fire, and they also aren't surprised because they both developed their stands at the same time. We're not going to be doing last lines for these Joestars, but Dragona's best line is said when they confront Jodio about the fire. The school bus. I know, Jodio. You're sick. You should go to the hospital. But I slept well last night. I felt so relieved. I got lots of sleep. Jodio, my little brother, thank you. I don't think I'd realized it myself, but my heart was on the verge of dying. If my soul had collapsed, then I don't think it would have ever gone back to normal. You did what you did before that could happen. I'll get stronger. I swear it. I really want to be stronger. Make sure not to tell anyone about this, okay? Not even Mama or Papa. Let's never touch on this subject again. There's no proof. It'll be a secret between just you and me forever. Jodio's first line is dedicated to defending Dragona from the bullies as well. Even though he's in elementary school at the time, he gets on the high school bus to help them. I only came here to meet up with my big brother. We're going home together. Big brother, let's get off. Has it been long? Her picking on you? When did it start? Her bullying you? Jodio is a bit of a mysterious character still, but one thing that's certain is that he loves his family and will do anything to defend them. This kid is so cold, man. My favorite line of his happens in one of the more recent chapters, after he kills one of the people that the main antagonist sends after him and his team. It's a grown man and police officer, but his partner is a spoiled little girl who takes his death really hard. Right before the group kidnaps her, he says, "I don't know who he was to you, but once you're done crying over him, you'll be leaving the hospital with us, got it? No ifs, ands, or buts. Bars." Now on to the Higashikata family. When we first meet Norisuke, he's kind of passively aggressively telling Hot Pants to get the fuck out his way because he came in first place in the fourth leg of the race. Excuse me, I guess you can drink before me. The finishing placement has no bearing on who gets to drink first, after all. Oh, by the way, I was first, but that really has nothing to do with who gets to drink first. What number were you? Norisuke makes a decent number of appearances in Steel Ball Run, but he is in no way a major character. During Johnny and Gyro's fight against Sandman, the duo initially thinks that he's the enemy stand user. Norisuke just happens to be in the area taking a nap, but once Johnny starts shooting at him, he makes his way toward the action to see what's going on. He asks, "What are you doing there?" Right before he gets shanked by Sandman. And since we've already talked about his daughter Rina, the next person in the family to have any speaking lines is the wife of his grandson, Norisuke III, Tomoko Higashikata. The first time we see Tomoko is in the flashback where she sacrifices herself for her son, using the equivalent exchange to save him from the Higashikata family sickness. As a young boy, Norisuke IV asks Tomoko if it was true that their family was cursed with a disease that made their skin hard like tree bark, and she responds, "Who did you hear that from? Come here, don't believe that nonsense." She only appears in this one scene and continues on saying, "Anyone born into this world will have trials to overcome. But the Higashikata family is a strong family. We walk a righteous path. You were born to the brave Higashikata family, and you'll be Norisuke IV. Diseases can be cured. There is a method to curing it. Your father was the same way, and he's still healthy and works a respectable job today." She does what she's supposed to do, and comforts her worrying son before sacrificing her own life so that he can live on. Norisuke's first line happens in this scene also. His anxiety is what causes her to speak to him in the first place. "Mom, is it true that there's a disease that makes the skin on your body hard like the bark on a tree? And all that about you losing your memories little by little, and then in the end you turn into stone and die? The kids from the next town over were saying that the first child of the Higashikata family is cursed. They were teasing me about how every generation we get that scary disease." This moment is so pivotal in Norisuke's life that he eventually resolves himself to do the exact same thing for his grandson Tsurugi one day. This causes him to come to blows with Jobin, his own son. Norisuke believes that the most noble thing a person can do is sacrifice themselves for their family, while Jobin is willing to do anything and exploit anyone to make sure his family succeeds. Eventually, Norisuke is ready to step aside for the next generation to take over, but once he finds out the truth of what Jobin has been doing to save Tsurugi, he hesitates. "Jobin? What did you do to this man?" Jobin reluctantly attempts to kill Norisuke, much to Norisuke's surprise. Jobin. Norisuke ends up surviving, but he misses out on the rest of the action because Jobin's attack knocks him out. Papa Norisuke is such a solid character who provides so much wisdom to his children, but unfortunately, his best line is, My ability is a long distance stand, but I'm not saying anymore. Trust me, this is private too. You wouldn't tell somebody in your own family where you hide your porno DVDs, right? You don't go showing other people your asshole. Stands are the same way.
Oh my god! What the hell?
The earliest moments we see from Kaato are in the flashback that shows how the Higashikata family was broken up. In the beginning, she's having a picnic with her 2 oldest children while pregnant with her worst child, Joshu. Hato is a toddler, so she's doing toddler things and offers Kaato a bite of her doll. No thanks, Mama doesn't nibble on dolls. Eat your lunch, dear. Kaato loves her children, especially Jobin, more than anything. If you aren't part of her family, good luck, because she doesn't let anything stop her from protecting or avenging them, not even Wonder of You and the natural law of calamity. The love she has for her children is what leads to the end of Toru's life, but she also suffers a fatal wound in the process of killing him. I can hear a siren far off. A fire truck? An ambulance is coming. Where was it now? Oh yes. When I went to crush the branch, that was an attack for me. This is a calamity. This saw he was holding before. I pressed it along with his left hand between my cards. Kato's best line is so significant in shaping basically everything about Jobin. The way he values his family is much more similar to the way Kaato does than Norisuke's. The night she decides to take control of her own fate by sacrificing Jobin's bully to save him, rather than sacrificing herself, leads him down a path guided by ruthless ambition. I refuse to be a woman whose life is decided by men. I'm deciding it myself, but I can live for your sake. Just now, I remembered the legend of Johnny Joestar, about the curse on this land. I've thought about that shrine for some time now. Places are unfair. They're not equal for everyone. You can't choose where you're born, but people climb to try to find happiness in those places. Jobin, starting now, you're going to start climbing in this place. And this person is someone who by his nature is at the bottom, and now he's going to sink to the depths of the earth. Her feeling expected to sacrifice her life to save Jobin is completely unfair, but at the end of the day, Kaato kills a child. Bully or not, this is a reprehensible act, and it's also a very selfish one, because she has 3 other children who need their mother as well. Up next, we have Jobin Higashikata. Jobin's first line is mad cute, man. He says it as Kaato is dropping him off at a Boy Scout camping trip. Kaato notices that his little shoes are untied, so she decides to fix that. And he responds just like any other kid would. I can tie them myself. Mom, this is embarrassing. Crazy that he grows up to be a dickhead though. Shortly after sliming his own father, Jobin attacks the head doctor, not knowing that he would in turn be struck by the forces of calamity. He dies from blood loss, spending his last moments thinking about the safety of his family, his last words being their names. Mitsuba. Tsurugi. What in the world is this? Mitsuba. Tsurugi. Jobin may have been a jerk, but he dies trying to protect his family. And for his best line, I'm going with something that perfectly encapsulates the clash of Norisuke's ideals with Kaato and Jobin's. Self-sacrifice versus the sacrifice of others. I have a very different philosophy from Grandpa Norisuke, but what I'm doing all of it for the future of the Higashikata family. Whatever nice sounding things my father says, the strong survive and the weak disappear. That's all there is to it. No matter who you are, no one in this world can avoid the law. Listen, Tsurugi, I'll make any sacrifice I have to make, or pay any price I have to pay. This curse on the Higashikata family, your illness, I swear I'll cure it. The only bad thing is defeat. I'm going to get my hands on that Rokakuga, and I'll keep them all for myself. I'm not letting anyone else have them. In one way or another, I'll eventually kill poor Tom. It sucks that Tsurugi loses his father, but I am glad that Jobin doesn't get a chance to truly indoctrinate him the same way Kaato did to Jobin. At first, Jobin's wife Mitsuba seems like she's going to be just a vain, superficial trophy wife. And yeah, she might be all of those things, but she is also so much more. Mitsuba is in the manga from almost the beginning, but she doesn't have her first line till almost 80 chapters in. She goes to the hospital for a checkup because she's been having trouble hearing and breathing. While waiting to see her doctor, the front desk calls for her and she responds, "Yes?" During the Higashikata family's confrontation with Toru and the Wonder of You, the safety slide panel from an airplane crashes through their house because of the calamity heading for Yasuo. In the chaos, Mitsuba thinks only of the safety of her son and calls out for him. "Tsurugi? Tsurugi! Again, Mitsuba is willing to sacrifice life and limb if it means protecting her children, even if they're unborn. During her fight against Dr. Wu Tomoki, she willingly eats one of the Rokakaka fruit to potentially save her unborn child, even if it means she could die in the process. It's okay. If I just run away from this with the excuse, I don't know, I'll never live it down. I already have feelings of love welling up in me. And when she makes the exchange, her nose is turned into stone. For someone as vain as Mitsuba, this is one of the worst things that could happen. Tsurugi is a strange kid. He actually is the worst when he's first introduced. A few characters in JoJolion are completely different by the end of the manga, and fortunately, Tsurugi is one of them because the first thing he does is kidnap and inappropriately touch Yasuo. Brushing whatever weird this is off, she asks him where they are, and he responds, "Want something to drink? I have a little soy milk and some cold cola." Luckily, Tsurugi makes it to the end of JoJolion, when everyone meets up at the fruit parlor to pick out a cake so they can celebrate Norisuke getting out the hospital. Because they're all still processing the loss of their family, they're having trouble picking out a cake, so Tsurugi says, "How about you, Josuke? Josuke, you choose it. You pick which cake we go with, Josuke." Tsurugi is still a young child. He should be playing Minecraft and doing whatever else 10-year-olds were doing in 2011, but instead he's just a big ball of fear and stress. He takes every opportunity that is presented to him to find a cure for the Higashikata illness, even if it means exploiting other people. But he's a scared kid, so you can't really blame him. When the illness finally takes over Tsurugi, it seems like he has accepted his fate because the first thing he does is try to comfort his mother. "I was already at the limit. Now it's finally here. The disease. The symptoms have been showing up little by little since a while ago. It just finally arrived. It looks like I'm out of time. This form must be because my stand is going out of control. I'm the eldest son and I'm 10 years old, right? The Higashikata family time limit has finally come. Mommy, please don't cry or worry about me. It's okay. We'll always have enemies out there somewhere, but we'll always win. The Higashikata family always wins." Just like with Kaato and Jobin, Hato says her first line in the mother and child flashback. When Jobin is skating around treating every day like a summer vacation, Hato sees him and says, "Oh man, that's so cool. You're like Hikaru Genji. I want to try." And in the end, at the fruit parlor, she goes along with Tsurugi saying, "Yeah, choose one, Josuke," when they're trying to decide which cake to go with. Joshu is one of the few characters whose first line happens during their first appearance. When we first meet Joshu, he's following Yasuo and being a creep. He says, "Yasuo, what are you doing? Hey, you, why, how could this happen?" Just try to come up with an excuse. How could you do that to my Yasuo? Out of the way, Yasuo. And his last line is at the fruit parlor also, where he says, "Josuke, just pick one, man." Even during the moment when Joshu says his best line, he shows off his obsession over Yasuo. But he kind of fools the reader into thinking that he's become this selfless person, which we all know is not true. The only real way to heal you is for you to eat this. And if this heals you, my little strawberry, it should heal Dad too. We can go to him next. We'll still have a little left over. I'm not gonna let anybody die. I can heal Tsurugi too. It should be able to cure the family curse. I'm not going to be a pathetic loser anymore. I'm going to save everybody. The first time I read this, he almost had me fooled, but he goes and ruins it almost immediately.
You're ruining it.
The last of the Higashikata children, Daiya, says her first line when Josuke is being introduced to his new family. She develops a crush on him as soon as she sees him. What do you think of Misty Mellotron? A Mellotron that falls from the sky like mist, fragile, heart of the sunrise. It's around 1 minute and 37 seconds in. Do you like it? And her last line at the fruit parlor is, we're a fruit seller, so then we can probably eliminate the cheesecakes and stuff maybe. Pick one, Josuke. Daiya says her best line when she's messing with Josuke's memories after he moves into the Higashikata estate. Have you ever thought about true happiness? True happiness. I already know. Happiness is to share memories with someone, not alone. Going places together, seeing things together, hearing something by chance together, eating together, laying around together, thinking together. That's happiness. I love you, Josuke. She doesn't really know what love is, but I can't lie. She's spitting here. Everything she says is facts, to a certain extent. Before I end the video, I just want to give a quick shout out to Persona Music. After spending countless hours sitting at my desk editing a video, the last thing I want to do is spend even more time jumping through hoops to find the perfect songs for my edit. It drives me crazy. Well, it did drive me crazy before I found Persona Music. Persona Music's library has the same tracks used by companies like Disney and Marvel for their trailers. Talking with Persona's AI, I can find the perfect track in seconds without clicking or scrolling. And it's completely royalty free. Use my code MixedUpMedia20 and get 20% off. That's going to be everything for now. If you liked the video, then make sure you check out the others in the series. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.